Dear friends, dear colleagues, welcome to the Professor Gerhard Heinzmann's second lecture. As usual, let me take the chance to do a short oral introduction about tonight's lecture. Professor Gerhard Heinzmann, you see, very intelligent, nice, friendly gentleman. He graduated with a master's degree in mathematics at the University of Heidelberg. Then received in 1981 his PhD degree in philosophy from the University of Saarbrücken, Germany. Then he became a fellow at the College of France in Paris, and then he taught at Saarbrücken University before becoming full professor of philosophy at the University of Lorraine in Nancy in 1992. He was the director of the founder in 1992 of the research group. I couldn't pronounce the French name. Echoes Henry Packard. He was the director of the Lorraine Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences from 2007 to 2014. He is the editor of the publications of the Henry Packard accounts, both published in France, French publisher, and Springer, and the editor of the journal, French journal, Philosophia Scientifique. His areas of specialization: Packard studies, philosophy of mathematics, philosophy of logic, French philosophy of science in the 20th century. His areas of competence: philosophy of language, history of science around 1900, dialogical logic. He had many publications, mainly French. I can't pronounce. His latest book is also French. I also something like institution, epistemic institution, something like that. He got many important honors. He was elected member of the International Academy for Science, Philosophy of Science in 2000 years. Then become the president of the AIPS for 5 years, from 2016 to 21. Just under his presidency of AIPS, I was luckily elected as the full member of IPS. Thanks very much for our former president. He also was the president of the organizing committee of the 14th International Congress of Logic, Methodology, and Philosophy of Science, 2011. He was elected member of the Academia Europaea in 2014. He was elected member of the European Academy of Sciences 2015. He was elected as the member of the International Institute of Philosophy 2021. So I also was a member, is a member of this institute. So we both in the International Institute, IPS and IIP. He was and is assessor of the Council of Division of Logic, Methodology, and the Philosophy of Science and Technology from 2012 to 15, and right now he still is from 2020 to 2003. He was awarded in 2066 on the proposal from the Academy of Sciences, Paris, with the scientific prize of the Prize Louis de Polygarlic Foundation. I can't pronounce correctly. So this is my short introduction about Professor Gerhard Heinzmann. I also give a short introduction. This is the Professor Wang Jin, nice lady, clever young person. She received her PhD in philosophy from Xiamen University in 2014. From 2012 to 2013, he was a visiting scholar at University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. He is now associate professor of philosophy department at Shanxi Normal University. He also got some honorary title. His major research covers philosophy of logic, formal epistemology, with a focus on truth, paradox, and vagueness. So now we welcome Professor Gerhard Heinzmann deliver his second lecture, a dialogical account of epistemic intuition. He talks about 90 minutes, and then Professor Wang Jin will give her short comment and question, at most 15 minutes. The audience write down your questions in chat room. The staff at 学识字 will forward your questions to us. Then Professor Gerhard Heinzmann will give his short replies. Okay, this is my short oral introduction. I close my PPT. Yes. It's the turn of Professor Gerhard Heinzmann. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Chenbo, for your kind introduction. And I'm very happy to be with you. And naturally, I regret that I could not come in person. But I hope that this will be possible in the next years. So today I will speak about a very difficult subject. This is the epistemic intuition. And I give a dialogical account of epistemic intuition. Now, first of all, I should go. So, the plan of my talk. First, I give terminological clarifications, classical difficulties of epistemic intuition, the decline of epistemic intuition, then my approach, the dialogical skill model, intuition as a special kind of semiotic functioning, and finally, applications in philosophy and in mathematics. I begin with two quotations. Poincaré says, when the logician has resolved each demonstration into a host of elementary operation, all of them correct, he will not yet be in possession of the whole reality. That indefinable something that constitutes the unity of the demonstration will still escape him completely. I quoted it in the first lecture too. And Wittgenstein says, in fact, the same thing. Everything that I say really amounts to this, that one can now approve thoroughly and follow it step by step, and yet at the same time not understand what it is that was proved. So the mathematician, the normal mathematician, might be do correct proof without understanding what he is doing. Now, this observation raises a question. How is understanding linked to knowledge and justification? If we do not understand when we justifies a proof. I put my answer in the philosophical tradition of American pragmatism, or better pragmatism, I mean of Charles Sanders Peirce. It is inspired, it is not the historically correct, but this is so the direction of my spirit. In this context, knowledge and justification are linked to understanding by know-how and knowledge by acquaintance. And these are often characterized as intuitive. So, what you see already, we will not understand the proof. We should understand the proof. To understand the proof, we should have a certain know-how, which is not given by logic. And this know-how proceeds by intuitive meanings. What means now appealing to intuition? Naturally, there are a lot of kinds of intuition. Intuition as a mode of access to scientifically non-accessible areas. There's a cabinet of curiosity. Intuition as an instrument in the context of discovery, similar to the flair. Naturally, if you discover mathematical proof, you have a certain flair how to do it. Intuition. Intuition as an almost immediate decision-making capacity. Even if you are in a discussion, if you drive a car and there is a red light, you should stop. This is an intuition, a decision-making intuition. And then the fourth sort of intuition, it is interesting for me, intuition as a basis of epistemic concept like knowledge, rational belief, reasoning, or understanding. So I ask me, is there necessary an element of intuition in understanding? So I'm only interested in this sense, in the fourth sense, and I will speak in a shortened way of epistemic intuition, because intuition necessary for knowledge, for understanding. Now, with the term epistemic intuition, I mean a use of intuition in a cognitive function as a basis of understanding and justification of the meaningfulness of terms. Then we speak of intuition of, if there are to understand the terms, and proposition or arguments. Then we speak of intuition that. I should first distinguish this kind of intuitions. It is usual to distinguish the intuition of X and the intuition that P. The first one concerns the grasping of an object, a concept. For instance, it is impossible to define the concept, a statement, or a whole theory, while the second one concerns the grasping of the truth of a statement, or the finding that the demonstration is conclusive. For instance, if the statement is not deduced from another statement by an inference, or if the demonstration has intuitive properties. Both perspective intuition of and intuition that were present from the beginning on in the history of Western philosophy. The Platonic noesis is a faculty of seeing ideas. The Aristotelian nous, an immediate faculty of founding the first principle of science. These principles of Aristotle oscillate between primitive proposition and primitive terms. Descartes distinguished the intuition of simple natures and truths. So this distinction is going to the history of Western philosophy. What is now the relationship between these two kinds of intuition? One could say that the main object of the intuition, that, consists in the recognition that a singular classificatory statement is credible. Thus, seeing a number written in red intuitively validates the position, this is an instance of a number, or this is an instance of red. This is not sure. You see a red, a number written in red. Maybe this is an instance of red, or this is an instance of redness. However, one might ask whether the intuition that P does not first require intervention of the intuition of in order to obtain an intuitive understanding of the predicate of P. Applied to the above examples, this view would require an intuitive understanding of the predicate red, or of the predicate being a number, using the actual instance of this red or this number. The singular proposition, this is an instance of red, which assigns the intuitively understood predicate red to an object, would then be only indirectly intuitive, because what is intuitive is the instance that this is red. Should we not rather speak in this case with Moritz Schlicker and the logical empiricism of the knowledge of the singular proposition P and the intuition of with respect to the predicate of P, or at least make a distinction between intuitive knowledge and intuition instead of distinguishing between intuition that and intuition of. Similarly, one might ask whether the intuitively true proposition that 2 + 2 = 4 is not based on the intuition of the unity, so that the proposition becomes knowledge based on the intuition of, does express a cognitive relation with objects. Naturally, this is the position, for example, from Leibniz and so on, that we have on Brouwer, we have an intuition of the unity, and then the other things are analytical. Can we then limit ourselves to the discussion of the intuition of, which seems to be the most elementary, or on the contrary, can we be satisfied with the only intuition that? I think nature is obvious. Nature ontological realism, nor the presupposition that identifies philosophical rationality with a conceptual analysis of language, which can be disposed of as a found object, have remained uncritical. I mean, think on that. If so, then in philosophy of language, we do as if it's a language we're given. But how is the language is given? How the category is that this is a sentence and this is not a sentence, is a concept, and so on. Where is this coming? My purpose is not to discuss ontological realism, which can be based on the intuition of. Naturally, if I'm an ontological realist and I say that things are given as they are, so the nature, we have language, and it's clear what language is. But it is not more clear what language is than what the nature is. Naturally, language is given as an empirical fact. But as the nature is given as empirical fact, but you know how it is difficult to know exactly what the nature is. And so it is difficult what the language is. And this is the error of the philosophy of language, of normal philosophy of language, of Austin and Searle and all these people. Now, concerning semantic realism, we know that trueness, for example, is a given. If one considers that the proposition is the ultimate unit of meaning and attributes to it a truth value, independently of the means available to access to the truth values, while we rather privilege the intuition that. Naturally, if one has this position, the philosophy is a bit crazy. It was Quine's position too, that there are a proposition is defined by this true values. But where are coming? How to know that it is true? If it's, for example, you have a Al quantifier about the infinite set. I prefer to be inspired by Ludwig Wittgenstein and treat the question of the semantics of the proposition of language as if one wanted to know the meaning of a pair of classes. Here, what the meaning of the pair of classes? To understand the meaning of the classes, it is not enough to look at them. If I look, I see, yes, it's classes. We see the object without understanding its function. Or to use them, it is on my nose, the glasses, we understand their function, but we do not see them. In fact, we would have to use them by squinting at the lenses. Something like so. Look through and look at the same time on the glasses. This is our situation where we are philosophically. Now, there are three families of epistemic intuition in the history. Naturally, always in Western history, I apologize. Sensitive intuition of empiricists based on the phenomenon. John Locke, who opposes intuitive cognition to demonstrate cognition, is an example. Intellectual intuition of the rationalist, which concerns abstract objects, number, set, concept, structures. Example of this type of intuition can be found in Descartes, who opposes intuition to deduction. In Leibniz, who opposes intuitive cognition to symbolic cognition, but also in Kurt Gödel. There are operative intuition in the Kantian tradition, which is associated with space and time, and where intuitive cognition is opposed to discursive cognition. Here, Poincaré, Husserl, Brauer, and Hermann Weyl belong to this tradition. Now, have there a common future of all this? At first glance, philosophical intuition is being supposed to give a vision of something. It is an authoritative way of seeming. Plato relates to ideas by considering visible figures. And according to John Locke, in an intuitive knowledge, the mind perceives the truth as the eye doth light, only by directed toward it. So intuition and vision, that is together. Now, I will you tell something of the difficulties of this conception of intuition in Aristotle. No, perhaps the first principles can no longer be deduced from other principles, Aristotle says, naturally. Aristotle introduced the notion of nous, often translated as intuition, to grasp these first principles. The acquisition of the first must be imagined in the same way, he says, as the inductive movement starting from sensation and leading to the general. So there is a sort of evolution, as we have knowledge by evolution. But now, if you think at it, this is that there are written about this problem 100 books. What is the problem? Now, if intuition is to grasp the first principles, there cannot be an inductive procedures, because the inductive procedures is not intuitive. It is just not intuitive. You cannot say, I have an intuition of this, and this intuition consists in an evolution of our knowledge competence. Then it is not intuition. Then it is a discursive inference. How it works together. Descartes, you know his cogito ergo sum, I think, so I exist. Understand, and this I know by intuition, says Descartes. Intuition is a representation which is the effect of the pure and attentive intelligence, inaccessible to doubt, which is born of the only light of the reason. I think, and if I think, in the moment, if I think, I exist. Okay, but naturally, this is not what you will in philosophy. You will the metaphysical, sure, I exist only if I think. If I do not think, I cannot exist. So you should have something which is during in time. The interpretation, the difficulties of the interpretation lies in the fact that the intellectual experience of the act of thinking lasts in time or requires identification in time, but nevertheless must be a simple unit. But if it is in time, it is not simple. So that's all problems of the Western philosophy, history of Western philosophy, and intuition. Locke, and they say concerning human understanding. Intuitive knowledge is characterized as immediate, as always. Is a presence in act to the mind of the relation between two simple ideas, he says. Example, the mind sees that white is not black. How can we clearly distinguish that white is not black? Think on this. You should intuitively distinguish that white is not black. But if we want to maintain that the simple ideas are the ideas of the instances of that white here, naturally you can see that white here is not that black here. But that's white is not black, it's different. This is the concept, the ideas, and he's only on the level of ideas. Because if you are not on the level of ideas, when of a level of instances, what happens? Then it can be the situation that the difference between white and not white is smaller than our sensitive minimum. That if you have I did not what animal had very good eyes, he would know that there's a difference in color, even if we human say this is the same color. You also see, if you are on the intuitive level, then you are on the level of instances. But then if you are on the level of instances, how will you distinguished? That is not in an experience, and when it is in experience, naturally it is not intuitive. Look, what happens with the intuition, with sensible intuition in geometry? Who put up does the geometric proposition two non-parallel lines intersect at a point A? To express an intuitive, clearly situation. A drawing would show this. And yet, if the two lines are almost but not quite parallel, my drawing table must be large and even very large for the result to be seen. You cannot see it. If it's only a 100 degree difference, you cannot see it. There are parallel for our eyes. So let's change the statement. In both straight lines represented by my drawings cut themselves in A. Now one identifies real space with the space as the mind represented. The straight line represented by my drawings. Do you see drawings? And this should represent the geometrical lines. But if, for example, the intersection is analytically attended in the square root of 2, but the functions are not defined on reals, the drawing cannot correctly represent the intersection. If the function is only defined on rational numbers, you can approach it, yes, but you cannot see as the two lines intersect in the square root of 2. That's the same as the point of intersection in the infinity. So let's change our proposition again. Do these non-parallel lines in my drawing intersect at the point A? In my drawing, so in the paper. Now it is not the case. Is this not the case actualized by the drawing? Any attempt at discursive explanations and a concept description seems superfluous and less clear. And yet, could it not be that my pen has run out of ink at a precise point where these lines should intersect, so that one could see that they do not intersect, at least if one were to look at the region of A under a microscope? Perhaps just if you have a very strong microscope to see, oh, they will not intersect. So, Kant draws a lesson of this. Empirical sensitive intuition thus seems prima facie not to give an infallible result to our inquiry. Rather, it serves the purpose of an illustration. just a heuristic means. But naturally, I will not heuristic. I will understand, philosophically understand. Not heuristic to work. I will understand. So perhaps we should use in geometry pure intuition, as Kant did. Pure intuition. And comes Poincaré's result. Poincaré's teaching since 1887 that at least a Kantian pure intuition is not acceptable in geometry. The doubt that since the earliest times accompanies the intuitive obviousness of the parallel postulate is confirmed by the existence of several possible geometries. At several possible geometries, you cannot have the a priori, that means a necessary pure intuition independent of experience of the space. Even if one disregards the necessity of the Kantian pure intuition, this later seems not be able to give us an unequivocal and unfallible understanding of the new geometries, because you should show naturally that non-Euclidean geometries which are useful in science have the same intuitive standard as Euclidean geometry. That's a big thing. So naturally there exists contradictory intuition. How? This is the problem, our problem. Our worry, how to handle these worries about contradictory intuition. So you should have a measure of intuition. The decline of epistemic intuition. From Plato and Aristotle to Descartes, Locke, Kant, and Helmholtz and Poincaré, different conceptions of cognitive intuition play an important role in the context of understanding and the certainty of mathematical knowledge. However, as early as the 17th century, the introduction of algebraic methods simultaneously circumscribed intuition as a method for validating proofs. Descartes subordinated geometric intuition to the purely intellectual character of algebra by its coordinate systems. Geometry is given up more or less, and you have analytic geometry with the coordinate system and real numbers. At the end of the 19th century discovers mathematical monsters and develops modern logic accompanied by deductive rigor, so that intuition is eliminated from proofs. Okay, this we have seen at the beginning, the situation. We have naturally completely correct proofs, are rigorous. But do we understand them? What is the criteria? Does one proof give understanding of the result and the other only the validity? You are sure that the results are valid, but you understand not why. This is a very often situation. Also, Bergson, the French philosopher, argues that there are things of which the philosopher feels unshakably certain. By the impetus of intuition, it is failing in disuse not only as a criterion of rigor for inference, but also as cognitive means in general. Intuitive description of natural phenomena are replaced in favor of quantitative laws of an idealized nature. This tendency manifests itself most clearly among those who belong to the circle of the logical empiricism. Hans Hahn's article, The Crisis of Intuition, is the best known example. Moritz Schlick also excludes intuition from knowledge in the strict sense, because it only contributes to the acquisition of an experience whose subjective character is distinguished from the objective character of knowledge. So, Schlick says, okay, intuition might be, but it's a subjective thing. It is not knowledge. Okay, what is argumentation? Like Peirce, he asks whether intuition fulfills the necessary condition that is traditionally required of knowledge and gives, like birth, a negative answer. His argument is based on three premises. Intuition is an immediate, non-conceptual belief. Okay, wonderful. Intuition is expressed by a vague binary relation of type a person P intuitively recognize an object X. Fine. Good. The knowledge relationships is at least tertiary. It has, in the simplest case, the form P recognize X, X as Y, reducing the unknown element X to the known element Y. So P knows if there exists an X and he identifies X with I, then he knows A. So intuition does not take the form of knowledge. The term intuitive knowledge is a contradiction. I think Mojlik is right. Intuitive knowledge is a contradiction. Okay. But this conclusion does not mean, according to Schlick, that the phenomenon of intuition is non-existent, but only that it should not be confused with philosophically scientific knowledge. Intuition only expresses an experience. Difficult to translate this German word Kenntnis. It is what you are experience in life. And indeed, the assertion that any continuous function is exactly reproducible in a drawing, does a stick have immersed in water the forms, or does the extension of any property forms a whole, the action of comprehension, seem to prima facie intuitive. So one has no belief in their truth, as though one is most attentive in this cut sense. You can contemplate the axiom of comprehension. It seems so intuitive, but you know it is not right. It is not there are what happened. Intuition, it is not a true belief. And conversely, belief is not necessarily intuitive in a common sense. The mathematical theorem whose truth is justified belief because one understands all the stages of his demonstration without, however, having an intuition of this truth is the proof. I see it, but I don't believe it. Kantor wrote to Dedekind in 1877 to express his dismay at his proof that there are on a segment of length 1 as many points as in a square of length 1. So you see the proof, justified, true belief, but it is not intuitive. On the other side, what is intuitive is not belief, and belief is not intuitive. Another problem then arises. Although one cannot apparently defeat intuition in relation to a true belief that is justified, it seems nevertheless reasonable to accept that intuition, even in its rational form, might well be erroneous, like perception and introspection. You see, everybody, you too, have confidence in a certain sense on our perception. You will not fall in the water. And naturally, perception is one thing which is necessary, but naturally, philosophically, it is very often erroneous. But intuition is the same thing. You need it, but it is not without error. On part 1, that one cannot apparently defeat intuition in a relation to a true belief that is justified. That confirms the Dappreis-Baguetti's problem and the cognitive value of a justified true belief. Well, if you see 4 dogs and one dog is shave but there are 4 dogs and one is under not visible. It is in a house or something like this. There are 4 dogs, but you see not 4 dogs. But why do you say that this is not just this is not a justified true belief? Why do you see the Gettier phrase that is not justified true belief? Because it is not intuitive. Dass if the statement I see 4 white dogs here on this street, and there are 4 white dogs in this street, but one is not visible, and what you see are in fact a shave, it looks like a dog. This is not a true justified belief. It is intuitive. That is not a justified true belief. You need intuition to have this. And the community, the scientific community, completely agree that the Gettier problem is shows that justified true belief can be used in a non-intuitive way. And then we say, it is not truly justified. Okay, and so on. Intuition is perhaps maybe different from belief. Intuition should also be distinguished from belief. Belief is not a seeming. Intuition is. I believe that a mathematical theorem is true because I control the proof step by step, but nevertheless it do not seem to me to be true and do not seem to me to be false. I do not have intuition about it either way. This is Poincaré's insights. 3 possible consequences from this situation. The assumption that epistemic intuition is not knowledge in the sense of a true and justified belief, or even not a belief at all, traditionally allows 3 conclusions to be drawn. Formal conventionalism, the Carnap, you eliminate intuition. Okay. But then you must say the formal language is naturally not the formalization of the contentual language, but then to say this, you have infinite regrets, because you have a meta language to show it, and so on, and then to show somehow I now arrive at the intuitive point. Carnap's view, okay, philosophy, you have just a different language, and then you have commodities, criterion to distinguish. Okay, but this I'm not interested in this because I'm interested in intuition. Naturalists' account of intuition and anti-naturalists' account of intuition. So the first attitude does not interest us. You can live without intuition, but you cannot understand. On this way, you can have philosophy without understanding. It's possible as mathematics without understanding, formal philosophy without understanding. It's nothing strange. It's a modern view of philosophy. Okay. So I will just discuss a little bit 2 and 3. Naturalist account, one adopt an empirical holism as Quine, where geometrical, mathematical, philosophical ontology are connected with the ontology of scientific theories. Here the phenomenon of comprehension, which is however quite obvious. If the pupil does not understand the explanation of his master, then you have a phenomenon of comprehension, is beyond the reach of the naturalist insofar that it is inaccessible to the cognitive sciences. I don't know if this comprehension of an understanding is already accessible to cognitive science today. I would say not, but that is a very complicated thing, because the emotions are going on. You understand much more better if you like the person that you are teaching. I saw this with my daughter. If she appreciated her teacher, she was learning. If it didn't appreciate her teacher, she was not learning. So they are a complicated thing. A second argument is given by the social epistemology, weakening knowledge to the acceptance of information which we deem a reliable source. We could then see the rational element of the intuition of S, that or of P, in the fact that S sees no procedure to challenge his fight. This allows to consider the fallibility of intuition. Okay. Now, in this naturalist perspective, the intuition is nothing other than the starting point of a rudimentary theory, expressed by classification or by instances of singular propositions of the form this is read, the bona fide evidence of which are uncontroversial because they are commanded by a wide agreement. Those helped by cognitive psychologists, methodological naturalists, as Hilary Conpleth, align intuition to a psychological fact of a disguised common sense hypothesis. Here, Hindikar gives a good argument. The Aristotelian nous, he says, has the form of a prima facie evident of a common opinion corresponding to the endoxa. This is what Aristotle would have, war the nous a sure or element of understanding and not of opinion. And naturally, in this naturalistic account, if intuition is just the first hypothesis of deduction, which can be the first hypothesis, which can always be revised naturally, then it is only an endoxa and not a nous. It has not the epistemic character of scientific knowledge. Now, you can say scientific knowledge is a dream. Scientific knowledge is naturally not sure. Yes, it is not sure, but can we understand it? The question is not if it's sure or not sure. My question is, can we understand it? Intuition is not sure, but endoxa, the opinion, Aristotelian opinion, give nothing to understand. Now, however, if naturalists maintain the word intuition, it expresses either some evidence on the nature of our mind, either initial assumption about the external world, eventually based on relationships of acquaintance, perception, accessible to the first person, or on the contrary, based on a wide agreement and on common belief. Intuition is neither immediate nor certain, nor a priori. It is interaction with the perception of real phenomena, which unlike concepts are for formalists the real goals of philosophical activities. Gut, das ist ein gutes Programm. I will show the difficulties in this program with the anti-naturalist account. According to anti-naturalists, intuition are purely a priori and therefore do not appeal to experience. Intuition is, you remember, this was the point for Descartes. Descartes said intuition is a priori, and nevertheless, if you will not follow Descartes on his word, but if you think with him, he has to introduce an intuition on time. So intuition is a sui generis, irreducible and natural propositional attitude that occurs episodically. But the attitude of the subject faced with such a proposition is not of the order of knowledge. Having the intuition does pay does not imply the truth of pay. Naturally, this is clear. Of the order of belief is not of the order of belief. Even if I intuited the appearance of a broken stick in the water, I do not believe my intuition, although I'm most attentive in the sense of Descartes. Is not of the order of desires or even of a form of instinct. Intuition is, according to Bieler, so he is an anti-naturalist, a seeming, an appearance to know whether or not there is knowledge. In the example of Getja, we obtain a very broad intuitive agreement on the question of knowing whether or not the subject knows thus P. The intuition is a seeming, it is not a disposition and is not normative. It allows us to make a decision under certain relevant cognitive conditions that need to be specified. So, it's very vague, naturally, that I will specify it. Intuition is something, it's not sure, it is not a belief, it is not a knowledge. But without intuition, you cannot understand with your abundant understanding in philosophy. Might be, cannot, yes, okay, because it is too much, ask too much. I think not. Naturally, this dispute, naturalist versus anti-naturalist, each side blames the other for the categorical confusion. The anti-naturalist says if the naturalist uses intuition, he must defend himself from using a philosophical tool, prima facie evidence, or he must be able to explain how I can account for the evidence from empirical beliefs. That's evidently he cannot do it, but he says this is not necessary. We have knowledge is always in progress, and we see the value of science exists in the progress and in the revision, and this is enough understanding. More metaphysical understanding is not possible, he says. Okay. The naturalist, what it is saying against the anti-naturalist. If the anti-naturalist uses intuition, either relying on externalism or on the authority of the first person, he does not realize that he is thus relying on a psychological common sense, which is a priori only in appearance. Aha. So the naturalist says, what if you will understand by intuition, you are obligatory in a Descartesian position that you are in a reality, you use as experience or psychological facts. Seeking a pure intuition is for the naturalist as unreasonable undertaking as that of wanting to reach a notion of pre-theoretical observation. Real phenomena, unlike concepts, are the real aims of philosophical activity. Real phenomena. Real phenomena. Yeah, what are real phenomena? What are real phenomena? What is real phenomena? I mean, if I say I give the White House now in Moscow, Russland, if I say the White House is in flame, there's a fire in the White House, that can have a very difficult signification. So you are less another political example. If I say the goal is a French, okay, this is right, but in saying the goal is a French, perhaps I would say, look at the goal. if you will be veritable French, because he is the incarnation of French behavior. How will you grasp such differences? Yes, that the goal is French is a phenomenon. But if you say the goal is French, this is not a phenomenon. How to take a conjecture to weigh out on these difficulties? Is it not imaginable, I ask you, that intuition is a simple seeing, nature based on pure data of experience, nor on pure data of reason? This would nothing implicate, of course, for its cognitive value. Perhaps we should give up the evidence that intuitiveness is ipso facto a virtue, a counterintuitiveness a vice. Perhaps it is possible to conceive, well, this is now the main point, to conceive the identification contained in Schlick's ternary relation, P, a knowledge, X as Y, as governed by a semiotic process leading to a simple but nevertheless cognitive penetrable identification, so that an intuition is more than merely beyond reasonable doubt, and yet that it need not be certain. It is certainly not a priori. So what I will do, to introduce this knowledge is as why this identification a semiotic in a semiotic approach in the following way. The next paragraph I try to show by a semiotic analysis how the intuition of intuition thus interacts with real phenomena, as long we can agree on the meaning of real phenomenon. We should construct what is a real phenomenon and not say, look, this is a real phenomenon. I think this is all the Western philosophy is on this over their nature there and the language as is given those we can perhaps find a way to output a dispute waiving antinaturalist naturalist and give to the question the respectable theoretical foundation they search for. Dialogical skill model, intuition as a special kind of semiotic functioning. Instead of posing real and anti-empiricism, personalism, and antinaturalism, I oppose two models of knowledge, perceptual model and the skill model. Skill in the sense of an aptitude of mind, of a competence. Naturally, this is the action of the purse. A little bit, you see, but it is not a historical purse, it's just the idea. In the perceptual model of epistemic intuition, the adequacy provided by intuition is judged to be between the thing, token or type, and the representation, or if one supports a phenomenological approach, between the thing and the degrees or types of feelings. In the skill model, the adequacy provided by the intuition is situated between the actor and the represented. That means an epistemic approach is substituted for an ontological approach, intuition of an object, or a semantical approach, intuition that a proposition P is reliable. This I will give a detailed reconstruction. Now, first, that you see very well the difference. the perceptual model, which I refuse. In a perceptual model, one assumes an analogy with perception, or one says that intuition finds its source in perception. Perception, how are we to identify the content of perceptual states in a way that preserves the epistemic innocence with regards to assumption about the world? That's not a problem. And how the egocentric perspective to the naive perceiver while also recognizing the epistemic significance. For intuition, how can intuition be at the same time non-justifiable, simple, obvious, comparatively stable, inside a given context, therefore epistemically significant, and however cognitively wrong, also perhaps corrigible? This we should see to understand the concept of intuition, that it can be this at the same time. How to do it? The condition of unreliability, Goldman and Post give seemings unreliable, the lack of information or disinformation, or the theory contamination. One presupposes that more reliable intuition is pre-theoretical, the old conception of intuition. Two questions. Now, the best approach in the perceptual model of perception is surely from Charles Parsons in Harvard. And two questions. So, what means Parsons with intuition? Is there some different conception of intuition that would allow a different answer concerning the use of intuition in abstract mathematics? This was his question. And he starts his explanation of intuition arithmetic with a concatenation of string strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he says, and look, and this is a mistake. You should know, you should understand why. Intuition is the capacity to recognize the perception of a token as a type. Intuition is the capacity to recognize the perception of a token as a type. There is a methodological problem. Parsons seems not to be clear about the different logical status of a singular and a particular. Parsons seems not to be clear about the status of a singular and a particular. One can perceive a singular execution of this of the string, but one cannot perceive a token which is a particular of a type. You cannot see that that is a token of a type. Tokens are already abstract entities. To see a singular as a token means to construct a singular as a token of a type. That is a particular. That is the token is already the capacity of the intuition to recognize that the singular is a particular of a type. To perceive a token means already to mention a singular performance as a particular correlated to a type, so that the simplicity of the perceptual intuition is lost. What you see, this is by Locke. What you see are strings, but you see not a type. You see not that it is a token of a type. You see the strings, and that this is a token that you have already to go to the type. That is a type from the token. You have already to abstract. That's because naturally the string can be long, can be not so long, and to see that this is the same, always you have to abstract, to have a token to be a type. So now I argue for the thesis that epistemic intuition does not depend nor on the nature of object, nor on the type of cognitive faculty used, nor on the level of semiotic system used, pre-conceptual first-order higher logic, but stems from a difference between the semiotic functioning of the action system in play. So the question, what is intuition, morphs into the question, when is there intuitive use? This is not a Goodman's approach. Now how it works. It is possible on the one hand to relax the close relationships, the schlick emergence for the intuitive act between subject and object, on the other hand to weaken the identification contained in the internal relation as governed by a semiotic process. P sees X under conditions Y, not P sees X as Y. So you should have a condition. If this were the case, one could see an internal structure of intuition to show that it is not cognitive impenetrable by distinguishing between what one intuits and how one intuits it. The mode of justification would then depend on the mode of understanding. If one sees X only under the sign of Y, then one intuits X. Thus, the cognitive force of the intuition would be beyond a reasonable doubt and below an a priori certainty. By criticizing the social epistemology, both the autonomy of the knowing subject and the independence of epistemic norm from the context, so both are criticizing with the sociology, both aspects, I show that the approach of dialogical pragmatism of Kuno Lorenz, my teacher in Saarbrücken, provides an argument for reconciling social epistemology and conceptual analysis by reconstruction, the meaning of the term real phenomenon. In order to understand what is given to us, for example, language, that is what one finds. We find language. For instance, common sense belief or scientific knowledge, it is necessary to make own creative efforts. However, attention is there. It would be wholly to think that one could understand in principle better a question than those who before us have already made similar efforts to understand it. So we should have both perspectives. In order to combine both perspectives, Kuno Lorenz proposes to interpret the creation of linguistic forms, respectively to analyze the transmitted linguistic contents as difference between an agent and a patient, reflecting differentiation between a practical and theoretical perspective. The agent presenting it and the patients taking it enter in dialogue on pragmatic construction, making it. In the analytic tradition, all objects were classified into different categories: substances, relation, qualities, subjects, objects, singular terms, general terms, propositions, and so on. Linguistic science represented these categories. But where do we get these categories from? This is the problem. Do they come from a transcendental deduction, from common sense, from consciousness, and or from intuition? Naturally, analytical philosopher says this is our given. But what is given, as you see the difference between the Chinese language and the European language. There are not the same language structure are given. This is not true. We will not presuppose such category. On the contrary, we should reconstruct them. And in my book, I limit myself to the singular classificatory proposition. The propositionality. So now this the the most important slides. The propositionality of an assertion is no longer a question of its truth functionality, if it has a truth value, but a result of a dialogue between a proposer and an opponent. So, by following and clarifying Lorenz's idea based on rules of persemiotics, the act by which an opponent concedes the propositionality of an elementary statement is worded as the condensed expression of an interaction between two people who are in an initial situation of Persian incomprehension in relation to the predicate of the assertion. I give examples, just theory and then examples. The execution of an action in the dialogue is read as the presentation of a quality, that is to say, as an icon. And the process of interaction is associated with an act of reflecting, development, a motivating, indexing process with a final decision to cut it short by stabilizing the difference. The interaction imply is potentially infinite because the dynamic can be launched with each act of explanation. The dialogue procedure, which is equivalent to a phenomenological reduction without adopting a transcendental attitude, has the result of a pragmatizing the domain of objects falling on the predicate of the statement. Now, this is very complicated, but with examples you will understand it. I have 20 minutes. If in a dialogue between a proposer and opponent, what is designated does not depend on the specific choice of a family of language action patterns, we speak of an object. Now, an object can be designated. So, now I stop here and so I will proceed. So, you see here my tie. Now, I say to you, okay, look, the tie. Look at it, then I go out. That is so okay. It is, yeah. This is the okay. This is so one tie. Then you say okay, tie. But you do not understand it. I say if you do so, okay, tie. You repeat it and so and. If we are, then I say tie, then you say tie. Okay, you understand now. So there are a lot of actions. We act together, and then we understand and we give a name to what we understood. This is an object. Now an object can be designated by a speech action patterns. The word tie, and words has a significant and a communicative function. If they are used in a purely significant function, they are called singular terms. You see, it's just if I say tie, this tie. If they are used in a purely communicative functions, this is not a tie. So I use tie as a general term. The expression, this is a tie, is then true or false. If it can be reduced in a certain way to a language pattern of action. If we are talking about this and then these are not the same objects, and we agree that they are not the same objects, or we are not. So the situation is, so the agent, looking at a glass of water. Okay, patient, seeing A is looking at a glass of water. Now the agent is drawing the glass of water. A, see, that the agent is drawing a glass of water. Then the agent accompany the seeing of B, looking at B, he says glass of water. By the vocal gesture, glass of water. This is an action too. Glass of water is an action. And the patient is hearing a vocal gesture. Actions are executed and perceived. I look, and you are seeing, thus I look at this glass of water. They are neither rational constructions nor simple data of perceptions. In the agent perspective, the action is a singular performance. Distinguishes only the numeral. I drink. Without individualization. This constitutes a pragmatic aspect of the action. In the patient perspective, the action is recognized, and perhaps if I drink more and more, then you will will believe that I think, because you see that the water diminished in the glass. And the action is recognized and understood and is general in character. This constitutes a semiotic aspect of the action. Actions, the agent, the I perspective, passions is the you perspective. The agent performs, passions recognize. Action is pragmatic, passions is semiotic. Action is natural, passions is symbolic. This is the again, the Aristotelian, assigned, producing singulars, producing generals. When performing is understood to be a case of producing, and analogous recognizing to be a case of witnessing, the action in question is treated as two objects. The token is an external particular caused by the singular performance, the type as an internal particular conceived by a universal recognition. Now, you see how it is complicated. What Parsons says always we perceive. No, we perceive not this particular, and these are very complicated construction. Note that the first order tokens are not perceptible, also causally related to performance, are not perceptible. They also cannot represent types on the same level. Token and type have in a dialogical construction the same abstract character. They are open objects with vague frontiers. One can always continue by acting so that types will develop independence on tokens. Now, intuitive use. One important requirement of the perspective is that the pragmatic singular and semiotic general aspects are linked by an inseparable correlation. The inseparability is seen by the circumstance that the sign is not yet used as a representation, which is independent of the situation of enunciation, so that the request of reliability does not settle at the same cognitive level. Das heißt, intuition is the symptom of epistemic intuition is this. Let us assume that elements of semiotic systems are used from the perspective of dialogical learning of science, the latter being interpreted as a language scheme of actions, as we have done. This use is a symptom of epistemic intuition if the singular and the general aspect of the action pattern are interdependent, so that the sign is not used as a representation that is independent of the situation of use, and so that a demand for legitimization of the sign's representation does not arise as the same level of reflection. That is, you are the intuitive, to have an intuitive level, if you have not yet a representation, but only a presentation. Paraphrasing Goodman, we can say that immediacy becomes a question of interdependence rather than a question of intimacy. This is not an intimate relation that we have, but in the relation of interdependence. Now there are different modes of epistemic intuition. The weak mode, the ability to interpret an iconic sign, use of signs in a presentative perspective is called intuitive. I will not interpret this much more. There's a strong mode. The logical possibilities of the iconic presentation form a closed system, so that the objects are represented and one is aware of the content, but the comprehension is always linked to a given situation. There is not yet a symbolic extrinsic representation. I go immediately to the examples. This is, voila, I have already shown it in my last speak. Here you have a weak mode. You should now please control it if I write, or if my definition is useful. The weak mode corresponds to an iconic use of the sign. Iconic shows represent different possibilities of representation without representing the object independently of the background context. So if you are here and you are switching, you see one, the duck, on the other hand, the rabbit. Then this is intuitive. You are not, you switch, you are a representation, you are a presentation, but not a representation. Now you can, the possibility of the presentation closed by naturally by a background experience. This is an index. You can say, if because I was always in a duck farm, I see here a duck. I cannot see very difficult it is for me to see a rabbit. I see a duck. I was always in a duck farm. This function as an index of an icon. The icon presents possibilities, and the index says one of these possibilities should be excluded. One should be not excluded, one should be take into consideration. If there are clauses on the sky, then the index is the icon is why it rains. If you see the clauses and you see already that there are something like a close from the closest to the earth here, then it is an index, because then you say the closest there will be rain. That is an icon. The possibility are close, there will be rain. Okay, there is a strong mode occurs when among the logical possibilities of the iconic presentation, one fixed perspective is chosen so that the objects are represented depending on the situation. One cannot abstract of the singular sign aspect in the representation. Is for this reason noted a symbolic representation. That means usually you'll use naturally in our science, in the language, as symbolic. The objects is not necessary here. You can speak about tigers without to see in tigers in reality. But that is not really symbolic. There is no intuitive. But naturally, you can on another level, you can use the same semiotic feature in mathematics for abstract entities too. So it is that if you accept one, symbolic is a symbolic notion, and then you can go up and see that there are intuitive levels because there are interdependency, for examples, in between geometry and topology. You can reason in geometry in a false way and have the exact results in topology, or something like this. There is an indirect mode of intuition with the course when the sign use can be reduced via intermediate members of the weak or strong mode, or when the sign use refers to the situation whose reliability was not questioned because it's itself reducible to a weak or strong mode of intuition, or might be by pure convention. This is the case in all proposition. I think there exists no proposition, no strong or weak intuitive proposition. Propositions are always indirect, only indirect, intuitive. Why? A singular classificatory proposition can only be indirectly intuitive.
Gerhard,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. I give you 10 minutes. to finish your talk. Then we have some time to discuss. Okay.
Okay.
10 minutes.
I just finished this these slides, and then I come to the conclusion. So to intuit the proposition is to seem it to be true because one understands it in a transformed form. Predicate can be intuitive, we have seen it, because you can have an action with it. But you can reduce a proposition always to an action. This was Reichenbach's, this is a little bit complicated, Reichenbach's star operation. You can say Tim is smoking, the smoking of Sim. And you can transform it, and this is the same thing, the proposition to action, and the action chain naturally can be intuitive, because intuitive can only be actions. Okay, so propositions are always indirectly intuitive. Summary, the symptom of an intuitive use is given through the fact that one uses a semiotic system in a certain perspective. One important requirement of this perspective is that the pragmatic and semiotic aspects are linked by an inseparable correlation. The inseparability is expressed by the circumstances that the sign is not yet used as a representation, which is independent of the situations of enunciation, so that the request of reliability does not settle at the same cognitive level. In order that the intuitive representation may be read as the representation of a general object, one has to introduce a context-dependent symbolic aspect. To end my argumentation, I still have to show that intuition respecting the point-out symptom is widely used mode at a level of language. I will do this in mathematics, but I will not do it. Thus, the pointed-out symptom is well present in the philosophical use of intuition. It should respect the cognitive connection between intuition and obviousness, explain as well the cognitive resistance of intuition as well as exhibition to error. Now I have done this for the classical example for proofs in mathematics, but I will definitely conclude. My aim was to avoid the classical difficulties of intuition in its philosophical rule, that is in the justificatory rule, by avoiding the metaphor of intellectual perception. I have not yet defended here the general framework chosen, a non-historical pragmatism, taking up some ideas of Kuhn and Lorraine. Nor do I claim that my interpretation of intuition is the best. On the other hand, I claim that this interpretation has the merit of better understanding some philosophical authors who use intuition in an epistemic sense. I also assume that this intuition gives a sufficient symptom to distinguish an explanatory demonstration from a merely logical correct demonstration in mathematics. I have pointed out the advantage of an anti-fundamentalist position of intuition, and I'm sure that you will underline its disadvantage. But I will answer you with Jules Villemin. Do the universal questions of metaphysics are answered by free decisions, which are never absolutely constrained by the states of affairs recognized by knowledge or even produced by action, even though they match them with variable condition of uncertainty and risk. So this is the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gerhard Heinzmann, for your very informative and stimulating talk. Intuition is very important topic for epistemology. So right now, the time for Professor Wang Jin for your short comment and question.
Professor Gerhard, I'm very honored to be the commentator of your lecture, and I'm very grateful to Professor Chen Bo for inviting me and giving me this valuable opportunity to communicate with you about intuition, which is a very important issue in philosophy. I would like to discuss my understanding after listening to your lecture from following aspects. In the first part of your lecture, you clarified the terminology, introduced 4 different meanings of intuition, and showed that the only interest in intuition in the sense of 4, that is, intuition as a basis of epistemic concepts like knowledge, rational belief, reasoning, and understanding, then you make a distinction between intuition of and intuition that, and introduces 3 families of epistemic intuition. They are sensitive in intuition, intellectual intuition, and operative intuition. And in the second part of your lecture, you analyze Aristotle's, Descartes, Locke's, and Kant's view on intuition and their problems, and also analyze in detail the difficulties with the geometric examples of 2 non-parallel lines intersection at a point A. This also illustrated the decline of epistemic intuition. And in the third part of your lecture, you pointed out the intuition is different from belief, and then we'll introduce 3 different results. Namely, one is form conventionalism. The representative is Carnap. The second one is a literalist account of intuition, and the third one is anti-literalist account. And you is not interested in you are not interested in the first attitude. Then, based on the latter 2 debate, you proposed an idea of conjunction in page 38, and the suggestion, perhaps it is possible to conceive the identification contained in Schleck's parallel relation P acknowledge X as Y as governed by a semiotic process leading to a simple but nevertheless cumulatively paradigm identification, such as an intuition, is more than merely beyond reasonable doubt, and yet it is certainly not a priori. And in the fourth part of your lecture, you proposed a new position. You said, instead of opposing realism and anti-realism, epistemicism and rationalism, literalism and anti-literalism, we opposed 2 models of knowledge, perceptual model and the skill model. And then you proposed a new red line for building models. You said on one hand, relax the close relationship the Schleck imagines for the intuitive act between subject and object. And on the other hand, to weaken the identification contained in the tenor relation as governed by a semiotic process. P seems X under condition Y. Meanwhile, the main characteristic of reconstruction work based on this pragmatism, such it is concluded that one important requirement of this perspective is that the pragmatic and the semiotic aspects are linked by a inseparable correlation. The inseparability is seen by the circumstance that the scene is not yet used as representative, which is independent of situation of in location, so that a request of a variable does not state at the same correlation level. And you get a summary that this is the simple term of an intuitive use is given through the fact that one uses a semiotic system is in a certain perspective. And you also emphasize that it is not only indirect intuition insofar as it can be transformed by reaching Baha's star operator in an action schema. You see that the flower is red can transform to star and the situation of the flower to be red. So you conclude that this summary, and in the last section, by recalling the differences of epistemic intuition, you used the example of the proof of root 2 to illustrate the practical application of your conclusion in the mathematics. And again, you emphasized that interpreted on the basis of epistemic intuition, the classic difficulties all seem to suffer from a misunderstanding of the type-token relation. And your aim was to avoid the classic difficulties of intuition in its philosophical role, such as justificationary, by avoiding the metaphor of intellectual perception, and to distinguish an explanatory demonstration from a merely logically correct demonstration in mathematics. And then after you listen to your lecture, there are some few questions I want to discuss with you. The first question is about Kant's intuition view in page 12 and 21. As we know that in the critique of pure reason, there are a very clearly distinction between this is German. I could not pronounce it well, but we know that they are different. Yes, but yeah, but we know that there are different kind of intuition that the Kant give us. So which kind of intuition did you talk about in your lecture? This is the first question. And the second question is that you have mentioned the phenomenology in your lecture, such as the dark rabbit picture. What do you think about Husserl's intuition view? Because according to Husserl, essential intuition is not avoidable, unlike deduction, induction, calculation, etc., and is the essential of the effective of intuition to knowledge from things. Here, for Husserl, essential intuition occurs without interference or the deduction or induction from another mental factories or calculative process. And its realization requires no other medium as a bridge. So what do you think about his idea of intuition? And my third question is, you according to your page, your page 53, you said, in my book, I limited myself to this singular classificatory proposition. Would you please say more detail about your strategy in your book? Because maybe the time is limited, we could not know much more about this. And the fourth question is, in page 68, the example of the indirection model, you mentioned a transformed form. I'm wondering what is the specific definition of the star operator? Okay, this is the fourth one. And this fifth one, could you please explain how your model could better address the theoretical problem of intuition? Because you have mentioned in your lecture, the intuition faced the two problem challenges, and the theoretical problem of intuition, the second one. And the last question is, after your dialogical account of epistemic intuition, do you think philosophers can use intuition as an evidence, for the knowledge? And does intuition then become reliable? There are so many questions for me that I think the time is limited. You can choose one or two if you like, and then we could give more time to our colleagues or the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy about your question. Excellent question, excellent understanding, excellent. That is a very good question. And one question, you are right. I was not completely honest. This is with the star operator. I will begin with this. This is Reichenbach, who introduced the star operator to switch from action language to the normal language, from action to language. I used it for the reduction, but in fact, is this, if you say, so you have the schema of action, you seem that Tom is a cigarette in this filming. Then naturally you can go to, yes, but what to the classificatory sentence or the simple elementary sentence. Tom is, what is to doing a cigarette? Is fuming in English? No, what is fumer? No, I then give another example. Here, so Gerhard is drinking. Okay, so Gerhard is drinking. Gerhard's drinking. So now we are in the action. Gerhard's drinking. Jean-Paul's drinking. So we should go to the proposition. Jean-Paul drinks. Gerhard drinks. What happens? Because you see, you have seen that the point. The action Jean-Paul's drinking, you had only the singular. This is an instance of Jean-Paul's drinking. This is an instance of Gerhard's drinking, but not so to. This is an instance. This is an instance. This is an instance, but not to Chenpo is drinking. What is this? This is the difference between which I would say between a predicative and the appredicative use. Chenpo's drinking is an appredicative use. Then you have the you have an understanding of the action, and then if you say Chenpo drinks, you have to be an understanding of drinking. But if you have an understanding of Chenpo's drinking, have you automatically an understanding of drinking? Because Chenpo drinks, the predicate has distinctive function. Chenpo drinks, Gerhard drinks, so there are different people drinks. But Chenpo's drinking is perhaps he has a way to drink as it's different from me. So you see, I'm not sure if you can always go from the action in a justified way as Reichen but things to the proposition, to the singular proposition. You understand why? Huh? It might be difficult. If you have the action, you have not yet the components of the action, what is necessary to understand that singular phrase. Okay, so to have this, I'm even not sure if I'm right to say that proposition is indirect intuitive. Okay, now the pre-theoretical point, naturally, because it is a semiotic, it is not yet language. Semiotic icon and index, these are in a certain way pre-theoretical, means pre-language, but it's not completely pre-language as by Bergson. It's not the intuition simply, or as by Husserl. You see, by Husserl, naturally, you have the fulfilling, and the intention should be fulfilled. But I do not understand it. What are the criterion? The criterion are the phenomenological insights. I will do nothing else as to go on the outside of the Husserl construction, but not to language, but to semiotics. Thus, fulfilling is to have an index. And the weak intuition is simply have an icon. Thus, we have the intention, but it's not yet fulfilled. Naturally, from Kant, intuition is Anschauung. That is a difficult point. Intuition in the French vocabulary is distinguished between intuition in the sense of a flair and intuition in the sense of Anschauung. That is so. Intuition in French is always the intuition for the intuition in German. If Kant speaks of intuitive, he means that one has a flair, so to discover something like this. And Anschauung is that this is of the sensibility of our mind. Our constitution has in the one side the understanding, and the other side the reason, and on the other side sensibility, and the capacity of for sensibility is Anschauung, and this I mean by intuition. So the English word intuition corresponds to the German
one.
Anschauung. Yes, yes.
I see.
And Kant in intuition, if Kant is speaking in German of intuition, he is speaking of flair. So.
Okay. I think, Gerhard, I suggest you stop here. I'd like to leave last chance to Professor Liu Fengrong. Do you like to say something?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. It's a wonderful talk. Also, the topic of intuition is so difficult. This is really an unusual talk that I have never attended. This is the first time. Usually I attend epistemology talks. They are talking about justification, knowledge, beliefs. But about intuition is such a difficult, really difficult topic. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. There's a lot for me to digest, but I want to just ask, because the time is limited, I want to ask a quick question. Have you ever thought about the relation between intuition and creativity? Because
Yes.
this term now, AI world using it a lot, they often put them together. What do you?
Yes, this is the Poincaré point. That this intuition is in fact the aesthetic, what Poincaré calls the aesthetic part of mathematics. That this means creativity. What means creativity for Poincaré? That means to bring together different fields, but naturally not in a mathematical, first in a mathematical correct way, but in a structural way. So that there are to see that there are the same structure, and then to go to mathematics and see that, for example, geometry can be very well formed in group theory. But you have first at all, you have this intuition. That means you see possibilities, this possibility, these possibilities, you see possibilities. And then you control it. And then you say, oh, yes, you can symbolically verify it. So intuition and creativity, these are, you can say these are the harmony of the mathematical, on the mathematical frame, too difficult to do what Aristotle and other, until the 19th century, they never have done, to go from one area to the other, from to category theory, or to have the intuition that there are possibilities which are deviant for the accepted formalism. You go out of accepted formalism, yes. And then you confirm this. You have intuition is very. I wrote an article about thought experiments and intuition in mathematics. These thought experiments are based on intuition. This deviance, and Hilbert says this in his Foundation of Mathematics, that thought experiments are very necessary in mathematics.
Thank you so much.
No,
I have an email for your papers.
Yeah.
Yes. I'd like to read more.
I know there are many clickers have questions to ask, but the time is limited. The time is up. So I'd like to stop here. I don't like to extend this lecture too long. So, thank you very much, Professor Gerhard.
Yeah, thank you very much. See you at two.
Heinzmann, for your interesting, challenging talk. As Liu Feng says, intuition is very difficult and challenging issue in contemporary epistemology and other affairs. Also, thanks very much for Professor Wang Jin's good job. Your
It's my honor.
very good summary and question. So you never disappointed me. So, the good job. Also, thanks for Professor Liu Fengrong's questions. So I think we should stop here.
Okay.
Then, yeah, Gerhard, I will go to the Minster to attend a peace conference this year. So I think we will meet there again.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
Then bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your lecture. Bye-bye.